So we're in the realm of speculation. But for a week now, the Daily Mail, the Times, the Sunday Times, and the Telegraph have all attacked Farage and Reform. Not just once or twice, but consistently. Their columnist, Dan Hodges, one of the kind of, if you're not watching this from the UK or not au fait with the Daily Mail, one of the kind of the um, front runners for most right wing economists in Great Britain, who has previously said all sorts of kind of glowing things about Farage, yesterday effectively implied that Farage was on some level treasonous, implying that there were connections, and this is only their implication, so yet to be firmed up, between Farage's donation, Farage's income, and Russian dark money, for which the former Brexit Party leader in Wales is currently being banged up for 10 years for this, to give you an idea of kind of the seriousness of what the Mail is hinting at. This is pretty much unprecedented, and it points to some sort of schism on the political right, which can only be a good thing. What does it indicate? Well, if we look at Trump, for whom Farage models his whole shtick on and wishes to emulate, wishes to be kind of Britain's version of Trump. Trump consciously waged a war against the legacy media in America and successfully brought them to heel, calculating that this was going to be eminently possible. And he's obviously riven with kind of resentments for his treatment by various American newspapers and TV stations over the years, with his various scandals and failings and that kind of thing. But Trump calculated that he didn't need the legacy media, and the legacy media would eventually bend the knee. And he calculated this on the assumption that he could, using social media, reach an audience directly. And he was right. He did do that. Can Farage do the same? Not convinced. Not convinced at all. In fact, I believe that Farage's reach is the product of Britain's legacy media, the newspapers and the BBC, who amplify him. And it is the product, really, of Britain's very, very, very incompetent political class that gave him all the material he ever needed to work with, from the Brexit referendum through to austerity, through to the small boats crisis, which was the product of the various Tory administrations ripping up safe routes into the UK. By the way, Farage has no interest in doing anything about austerity, but it just creates a large number of very, very alienated, disaffected, angry people, and that's, meat and drink for his purposes. Anyway, I think if Farage believes that he can, because after the kind of the criticism from the Mail and from the Times, Farage has decided to, particularly in the case of the Times, Farage and Richard Tice have decided to have a pop at the Times, and this again, I think, is folly on his part. I think that a more sensible, a more seasoned, a less thin-skinned politician would take whatever they had to say on the chin, suck it up, ignore it, carry on. He can't do that, and that tells me something about the degree of desperation I think he's in at the moment, as he sees everything that was going so rosily earlier on in the year starting to kind of fizzle out, and looking for saboteurs and traitors everywhere. Um, Farage is lashing out, obviously, but my question is always all of this dodgy dealing around money, and we're not even getting onto Anne Widdecombe yet. But all this dodgy dealing around money, all of that has been known about by most Fleet Street hacks for years. Nothing of this is new. They've basically dusting off stuff that's been in the archives for ages. Um, and is it that it's being weaponized at a particular moment? Well, one theory put by Phil Morehouse on A Different Bias is that Farage played the media game. He did stunts, going down the Thames in small boats during the Brexit referendum, and it gave the media easy clicks. And now there's a tipping point has come where people despise him sufficiently that the easy clicks come not from publicising him, but from shining a light on his nefarious goings on. And so he's reaping what he's sowed. That, to some extent, I can buy. But I believe that Farage's usefulness may be coming to an end anyway. And I think if it doesn't matter how many newspapers can be sold, how many clicks can be gained through doing a number on him, if it's useful for media bosses and media owners to not do a number on him, then they won't do. 4 by-election losses in a row. That's not irrelevant in all of this. That matters. If you lose 4 by-elections in a row, it indicates to the people that back you that something's fundamentally wrong there. That there is a body of people in the country who are, and a significant body of the people in the country who will do anything not to have Farage. Then, if you look at how local government is run by people who are so incompetent, they're not even aware of what councillors should be doing. These were just people that thought that they would get kind of a seat on Worcestershire County Council and end immigration, and it is as farcical as that. So there would be a kind of an incompetence crisis in Britain, which some of the time I'm sure newspaper owners don't really care about, but there is sufficient reason for them to still want a functioning state and not to have the state descend into this kind of Trumpist moment of basically chaos and theft. If you are already very, very rich and powerful, then you tend to benefit from a state that functions quite nicely and doles out ample rewards and tax breaks and opportunities for investment in the way that you're accustomed to. So there is a lot to be dubious about. Also, as it becomes less and less likely that Farage can have a popularity breakthrough or popular breakthrough, newspapers will need to look at the outcome of the next general election, either a total Reform defeat and drop a loser before it's too late, or if there is some kind of Reform victory and the results are apocalyptically terrible. There are newspapers out there that do not wish to be associated with that. They don't wish for that to be their legacy. Again, not because they care about the cruel things that Farage has proposed to do, they approve of many of those wholeheartedly, but because the reform brand is starting to stink. And I think that is the essence of it. Practically less useful than we thought, and publicly and politically starting to whiff. And I think that um, the recent allegations around money, which will run and run, and there'll be more and more of them. Um, because they've been racked up for years. Those have tainted the brand hugely. I mean, Farage's polling has collapsed this week. Whether he'll lose in Clacton is a different matter. I'm not so sure. I think he might just squeak a win there, but on a reduced majority significantly, having looked very foolish arguing with a bin for 6 weeks. But then we get on to the question of Anne Widdecombe. Now, the story's changed slightly in the last sort of 24 hours, where originally the police believed that it was a burglary gone wrong. Now, for some reason unknown to the rest of us as of yet, but that hasn't stopped people like Richard Tice tweeting and Zia Yusuf tweeting. It looks like there's the grounds to think of this as a terror-related offence. Again, what that means and why it's being treated like that, I don't know, and it's wrong to speculate, but it is. Of course, Reform now are, in a typical kind of slightly tasteless manner, crawling over all this as if it's a win and saying, I don't know, it was a Remainer what done it. I very much doubt that. And they are using what happened to a terrified defenseless 78-year-old woman in the most grotesque of ways, really, really obscene. And again, it smacks of desperation. They think that they can turn this into a Charlie Kirk type experience. And again, trying to import American type culture wars into Britain doesn't always fail, but it rarely succeeds in the way that is hoped for. Things in America don't translate into Britain quite in that way. And also, Anne Widdecombe's public persona before she was murdered is very, very different from that of Charlie Kirk. She's the sort of the kind of sort of right wing curmudgeon. That's about the nicest thing you could say about her. The truth is this kind of repressive authoritarian figure who was anti-gay and did not anti-choice and anti a whole bunch of other stuff which we've probably not got time enough to list here. Anyway, so the kind of the usage of Anne Widdecombe's memory, I think, will simply be sniffed out as just obscene opportunism, and people don't like that in Britain. They really don't. It's seen as kind of crass and horrible and tasteless and exploitative, and it is. And I think there's a window of a chance that Farage might, as he starts to look more and more foolish in the face of the onslaught of bin face, say, well, you see, Reform politicians, we're being, we're a dying breed. We're being, we're under threat of our lives. I'm going to have to go and become a Fox News host in America to remain safe in a country with tens of millions of firearms. I think that's a possibility. But coming back to my original thesis, I think there's now I began to wonder about this a week or two ago, when Farage's star began to kind of wane. And I genuinely think that there is something to this now, that there is some kind of schism there on the political and media right. And what that will result in, I think, probably, will be lots of newspaper proprietors and holding their nose and giving Burnham a go for a bit, to see how right wing he can be. And I think it will result in eventually them dropping him. I can't see them backing Badenoch for reasons purely of racism and misogyny. But I think that that what will probably happen is that as Badenoch, for her own kind of, in her own sort of kind of incompetence, still kind of flounders, there will be some sort of coup in the Tory party, and the right wing press will come home. Their little experiment with Farage and the Mountebank, the Farage insurrection, will come to an end. And we might even see some sort of drift back towards not, two-party politics, but maybe 2 or 3 party politics. But we shall see. Okay.